Oh, hi folks, I'm Mike, and welcome to my channel. If you've seen any of my videos, then I'm sure you know I'll be talking about Pinewood Derby racing. In today's video, I'm going to go over aerodynamics. So I'll discuss fenders and air shields. I'll go over the benefits, I'll show you how I make and install mine, and then I'll go over a much easier alternative. So stay with me, you might find this helpful. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I was going to go over the benefits of using fenders and air shields. So I'm going to start here with these two cars. I did not pick these two cars at random. I picked these two cars specifically because they are exactly the same build. They have the same wheels, they have the same axles, they weigh the same. The only difference is this car has fenders and this car doesn't. This is my MA car and this is my Basics Extreme car. Both of these cars are competitive. As a matter of fact, both of these cars have won championships before. Now, this car, the MA, on a 42-foot track all alone, without any other cars creating bad air, can run 2.905. This car, all alone on a 42-foot track, without any other cars creating bad air, can run a 2.916. So the difference is about 11 thousandths of a second. So, you know, if I'm racing in a Cub Scout race, I don't know if you would think of that as a lot of gains. I can tell you though, that if you plan on racing in the leagues, and a class allows you to race fenders and you don't have them, you're going to come in last place. That's all there is to it. I know Reese, he won his district race without any fenders, so I'm not sure it's as critical in the Scouts, but if you want to race in the leagues, it's pretty critical. I'm not going to lie to you, if you've seen any of my other videos, you may know that I own a laser, and as a result, I use it to cut my fenders. This is actually how I did it before I had the laser. Now I'm going to start with a 3/8 inch thick balsa. You can typically find this at most hobby stores. Next I'll lay it out. I'll start with a 7-inch long line that is 5/8 of an inch off of the edge. From here, I'll refer to my body and confirm the wheelbase. This car is a pure stock, so the wheelbase matches the wheelbase you'd find on the block in the kit that you'd pick up at the Boy Scout store. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to come forward from the back of the car 7/8 of an inch, and I'm going to make a mark. Then from that mark, I'll come forward again 4 3/8 of an inch and mark the line again. Now these two marks represent the center of each one of the wheels. Next I'll drill a hole at each location, insert a pin gauge, and then insert a scrap wheel that are the same height as the wheels I intend to race. Next I'm just going to trace around each wheel. Now I'm going to remove the wheels, and I'm going to mark 2 straight lines connecting the 2 wheels. For the front, I'm simply going to make a point. I'm going to go from the top of the wheel to the center line, from the bottom of the wheel to the center line. Now one thing I will do is I'm going to extend it just a little bit past my 7-inch mark, because I know later it's pretty simple to sand it down to the front edge of the car. So when all that is done, this is what you're going to end up with. At this point, it can be cut out with a scroll saw. Now I'll remove the line completely around the wheels especially, just to make sure I have a little clearance at the wheel. After all, if it rubs, you'll be losing all of your potential gains, and some. I'll also make sure I remove enough mass on the bottom so the fender can clear the track. Once they're cut, it's time to install. So here's the body I'll be using. I mentioned earlier that this is a pure stock wheelbase, so it's got the same wheelbase as the block of wood you'd find in the kit at the Boy Scout store. These are the fenders. Now although I prefer 3/8 inch balsa, I didn't have any, so I glued 2 fenders together that measure 1/4 inch thick. That just means I'm going to have to remove more mass later. These are the rear fenders, and these are the front fenders. Now I'll also be using a scrap set of wheels that are the same diameter as the wheels I intend to race, and a scrap set of axles, and a few rubber bands. Now I promise this will make better sense in just a few minutes. The first thing I'll do is I'm going to take a couple rubber bands and I'm going to tie them in a knot. Then I'll slide the wheel into the rubber band. Now I do this to make sure that there's clearance between the fender and the wheel. Next I'll insert an axle into the wheel and install the wheel to the side of the car. On the rear wheels, I don't have to insert the axle all the way, so I'll leave them out a little bit just to make it easier to remove later. Now the front dominant wheel with the bent axle will need to be installed completely, and it's going to need twisted to about the location it'll be raced in. Now here you can see that the fenders needed sanded slightly to provide the clearance. Now that this fender fits well, I'll glue it into place, and then I'll do the same on the other side and both fronts. So if the wheel's not spinning freely, I'm going to wrap it with sandpaper pointed outward, and I'll sand the fenders until the wheel spins freely. Now that the wheels are all spinning freely, I'll mark the fenders where I want to remove mass. Now we only want the fender covering the wheel. If the fenders are too wide, they'll cut more air than needed. So I'm marking each fender where I'll remove the mass. I'll draw a line to connect the front and rear, and I'll do this on the top and bottom of each fender. These are my cut lines. Now I'll use a razor blade to remove most of the mass, and then I'll use sandpaper to smooth them down and shape them to the final form. Here's the finished set of fenders. Okay, so let's talk air shields. These are all air shields. Now, air shields are designed to keep air from entering the cavity of the wheel. Although I've never tested to see what exact gains are, people much smarter than me, people that I trust, have all told me the same thing, that it's worth about 3/1000th of a second. Now, most air shields are vacuum formed out of 30/1000ths plastic, and most vendors offer them for sale. Today, though, I'm going to show you how to make a set out of balsa. Now again, I used my laser, but if you're capable of cutting a circle that's 9/10ths of an inch tall with a hole in the middle that's 0.270 inches tall, you can do this. So here's how I install them. I'll wrap tape around the hub of a scrap wheel. I'll do that to increase the hub diameter so it will fit snugly in the air shield. Then I'll slide the air shield right over top of the hub. I'll insert an axle and install on the side of the car. I think I forgot to mention to add glue. So this is what it looks like before I shape it. Now we're going to want to cut these back some so we aren't cutting too much air. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is how I cut them. A little sanding and it's done. Okay folks, so now I'd like to discuss the alternative fenders that I mentioned earlier. I'm sure you'd agree, after watching this much of my video, that building a set of fenders from scratch is a lot of hard work. As a matter of fact, I typically have more time building a set of fenders from scratch than I do the entire rest of the build. But I always felt that it was a necessary evil. My opinion has changed. Turbo Derby out of Charlotte, North Carolina is now offering 3D printed fenders that takes all the work out of it. Now initially, I must admit, I was skeptical. I didn't think that somebody could 3D print a set of fenders that would fit properly. I felt like it would either be too wide or maybe it wouldn't cover the wheel properly. But I was wrong, these things fit great. The only adjustment I have to make is depending on the class I'm racing. I run different hub lengths on my wheel. So in some occasions, I'll have to shim them out a little bit to cover the wheel properly. But what a small price to pay in comparison. And if you're unsure of your wheelbase, they make a generic set of fenders that can be used with multiple wheelbases. You can find these on my website. Okay, so folks, there is one thing I forgot to mention during the video. At the dominant front wheel, on the underside of the fenders, you're gonna have to shave that back just a little bit. Otherwise, the fender's gonna rub the rail. And that's all I've got to say about these fenders. So thank you for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe. I'm gonna pick a name at random, and I'm gonna send that person a set of Turbo Derby fenders. We'll see you on the next one.